Hello and welcome to another part of the Azure Administrator Exam Practice Question Series, folks. In this video, we will walk you through exam practice questions which are focused on most important topics covered in the exam. Along the way, we will share valuable tips and strategies to help you approach each question with confidence, ensuring you are well equipped to earn your certification on your first attempts. Folks, if you have any feedback on how we can improve this experience for you, then please post it in the comment section so we can make changes going forward and our content suits you based on your requirements. So without wasting much time, let's get started. You have an on-premise file server named Server 1 that runs Windows Server 2016. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure file share. You deploy an Azure file sync storage sync service and you create a sync group. You need to synchronize files from Server 1 to Azure. Which 4 actions should you perform in sequence? To answer, move the appropriate actions from the list of actions to the answer area and arrange in correct order. On the left-hand side, you have some actions, and right-hand side has the answer area section where you need to drag all the correct answers and you need to arrange them in the correct order. So basically, if I sum up, then the requirement is you need to synchronize files from an on-premise server to Azure file share. In order to perform this, the steps you will perform are, first of all, you'll install the Azure file sync agent on the on-premise server. So in this case, the server is server 1. Then you will register the server, followed by creating a sync group and a cloud endpoint. You'll finish the setup by adding a server endpoint. Let's now look at these steps in more details. So as you know, the first step is to install the Azure file sync agent on server 1. As it goes with every client server model, you basically install an agent on the client server so that the server can coordinate with it. An Azure file sync agent is a downloadable package that enables Windows Server to be synced with an Azure file share. Now, the next step is you will have to register the server. And here we are talking about registering the on-premise server, which is a client in this case. So registering your Windows Server with a storage sync service establishes a trust relationship between your server and the storage sync service. Now, the next step is you'll create a sync group and a cloud endpoint. A sync group defines the sync topology for a set of files. Endpoints within a sync group are kept in sync with each other. A sync group must contain one cloud endpoint, which represents an Azure file share, and one or more server endpoints, which is going to be created in the next step. And a server endpoint represents a specific location on the registered server. Basically, this is the location which is going to sync with the Azure file sync server. Now, there is a link on your screen at the moment at the bottom, which you can refer to read more about how this setup is done. And this will have more details around the setup than just these 4 steps. Moving on to next question. You have an Azure subscription that contains the storage accounts shown in the following table. The table has name of some of the storage accounts, what are their types, and what is the performance setup for them. You plan to manage the data stored in the accounts by using lifecycle management rules. To which storage accounts can you apply lifecycle management rules? Now, you need to choose which storage accounts can the lifecycle management rules be applied to. Your options are storage 1 only, storage 1 and 2 only, storage 3 and 4 only, storage 1, 2 and 3 only, storage 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. Basically, the last option has all the storage accounts listed. So the correct answer in this case is option D, storage 1, 2 and 3 only. The lifecycle management feature is available in all Azure regions for general purpose version 2 accounts, blob storage accounts, premium block Blob storage accounts, and Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 accounts. Now, going by this statement, if you look at the type of the storage accounts that are mentioned here, storage 1, 2, and 3 are the ones that contain the storage account types which support lifecycle management policies, hence making them the correct options in this case. Question number 33. Your company has a Microsoft SQL Server always on availability group configured on their Azure virtual machines. You need to configure an Azure internal load balancer as a listener for the availability group. Solution is you enable floating IP. Does the solution meet the goal? You need to choose between yes or no. Yes, the solution meets the goal. You can refer to the link to read around all the load balancing rules of this setup and not just floating IP. So if you go through this link, you will understand more about this setup, and you will also be better equipped to answer different variations of this question. So I strongly suggest you to go through this link. Moving on to next question. You plan to track resource usage and prevent the deletion of resources. To which resources can you apply locks and tags? To answer, select appropriate options in the answer area. In the answer area for the locks, you have RG1 and VM1 only, then sub1 and RG1 only, then sub1, RG1 and VM1 only, MG1, sub1, RG1 and VM1. So basically, they have not specified here that what is RG1 or what is VM1, but these are basically short forms of different things that exist in Azure. So let's say RG1 stands for resource group, VM1 stands for virtual machine 1, sub1 stands for subscription 1, and MG1 stands for management group. So if there are full forms that are not defined in the questions, these are generic terms which you should be across when dealing with Azure. Similarly, for tags, these are the same options that are available. So you need to choose which one are the right options, basically to which resources you can apply locks and tags. So the correct answers are on your screen now. Tags and locks can be applied to subscriptions, resource groups, and resources only, hence making sub1, RG1, and VM1 only as the correct option. Moving on to question number 35. You have a computer named computer 1 that has point-to-site VPN connection to an Azure virtual network named VNet1. The point-to-site connection uses a self-signed certificate. From Azure, you download and install the VPN client configuration package on a computer named Computer 2. You need to ensure that you can establish a point-to-site VPN connection to VNet1 from Computer 2. The solution is you modify the Azure Active Directory authentication policies. Does the solution meet the goal? You need to choose between yes or no. So before going to answer this question, try to understand the question in a better way. This is a very big question, so break it into small statements. See what is the meaning of the first statement, what they are trying to convey in the second statement, and then what they are asking in the closing statement. So the first statement basically here is you have a computer named Computer 1 that has a point-to-site VPN connection to Azure Virtual Network VNet1. So Computer 1 already has a P2S VPN connection to VNet1, which uses self-signed certificate for authentication. Now you need to set up the same connection from another computer named Computer 2. And what you do is you modify the Azure Active Directory authentication policies. Now, do you think this is the correct option? No, this is not the correct solution. Point-to-site connection uses certificates to authenticate, which you could have seen. They have already mentioned that the point-to-site connection uses a self-signed certificate. So what you'll have to do, you will need to export the client certificate from computer 1 and install the certificate on computer 2, which is what is the solution that is needed in this. So you can again refer to the link on your screen to understand the point to site connection in more detail. Question number 36. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 that contains a virtual network named VNet1. VNet1 is in a resource group named RG1. Subscription 1 has a user named User1. User1 has the following roles: reader, security admin, security reader. You need to ensure that User1 can assign the reader role for VNet1 to other users. What should you do? Your options are: assign User1 the network contributor role for VNet1, assign User1 the owner role for VNet1, remove User1 from the security reader role for Subscription 1, assign User1 the contributor role for RG1, assign User1 the contributor role for VNet1. So this question has lots of data. Be careful to spot the keywords that are being talked about here before answering this question. They are talking about different roles: network contributor, owner role, security reader role, and again, a contributor role, which is a generic contributor role. So to answer this question, you should be across with the built-in roles in Azure. So let's look at the answer, and then we will talk about what is the purpose of each role which is being mentioned in this question. So the correct answer is assign User1 the owner role for VNet1. Let's now look at the details of each of the roles being talked about here. The first one is network contributor role, which is being talked about in the first option. It lets you manage network but not access to them, which is why this was not the correct answer. The second option talks about security reader roles, which allows you to view permissions for Microsoft Defender for cloud, can make recommendations, alerts, security policy, and security states, but cannot make changes. Now, the third one was the correct answer, but here we are going to talk about the generic contributor role first, and then we will go to the option which we choose as a correct one. So the contributor role again grants full access to manage all resources, but does not allow you to assign roles in Azure RBAC, which is what needs to be done in this question. So the right answer was owner role. Basically, owner role grants full access to manage all resources, including the ability to assign roles in Azure RBAC, making it as the correct option in this case. You can refer to the link on your screen to read more about other built-in roles that are available. There can be many variations to this question. So it is highly recommended that you are across what are the different type of built-in roles available in Azure. Question number 37. You have an Azure Active Directory tenant named contoso.com. You have a CSV file that contains the names and email addresses of 500 external users. You need to create a guest user account in contoso.com for each of the 500 external users. Make a note of the keyword here. They are talking about external users. You should know that the process to create a user which is in your tenant is different as compared to external user, which is the key to answer this question. So the solution you choose is from Azure AD in the Azure portal. You use the bulk create user operation. Does this meet the goal? You need to choose between yes or no. No, it doesn't meet the goal. To send bulk invitations to external user, you'll follow these steps. Use bulk invite users to prepare a comma separated value, which is CSV file with the user information and invitation preferences. Upload the CSV file to Azure AD, and then you will verify the users were added to the directory. Basically, when you are adding the external users, you use invite option and not create option. Bulk create is for internal users, which is why I was telling you, you focus on the keyword that you need to deal with external users here. Moving on to question number 38. You plan to automate the deployment of a virtual machine scale set that uses the Windows Server 2016 data center image. You need to ensure that when the scale set virtual machines are provisioned, they have web server components installed. Which two actions should you perform? Your options are create an automation account, upload a configuration script, create an Azure policy, modify the extension profile section of the Azure Resource Manager template, create a new virtual machine scale set in the Azure portal. So the correct options in this case are option B and D. Upload a configuration script and modify the extension profile section of the Azure Resource Manager template. Let's look at why others are not correct. Let's start from bottom. Option E talks about creating virtual machine scale set from Azure portal. But then the question says automation. So this is incorrect as it will add manual effort. Try to eliminate the options. It is a very good way to deal with questions in any of the certification exams. Try to eliminate the wrong options and then it will be very easy for you to answer. The next option, which is option C, is related to Azure policy, which is again incorrect as policies are used for governance. But here we need to install a web server component on virtual machine. Now the first option, which is automation account. Automation account will definitely be needed when trying to achieve an automation. However, it doesn't relate to installation of a web server component on a virtual machine, hence making it an incorrect option. Let's move to question number 39 now. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that runs Windows Server 2019. You need to create an alert in Azure when more than 2 error events are logged to the system event log on VM1 within an hour. The solution, you create an event subscription on VM1, you create an alert in Azure Monitor and specify VM1 as the source. Does this meet the goal? You need to choose between yes and no. So it doesn't meet the goal. You need to specify log analytics as the source for this alert and not the VM. The detailed steps are you create a Azure log analytics workspace and configure the data settings. Then you will install the Microsoft monitoring agent on VM1. And then you create an alert in Azure Monitor and specify the log analytics workspace as the source. Again, there is a link on your screen. Refer to this link to understand this setup in more detail. Question number 40. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 that contains an Azure Log Analytics workspace named Workspace 1. You need to view the error events from a table named Event. Which query should you run in Workspace 1? Your options are basically 4 different types of queries. And the correct answer is option C. You can refer to the link again on your screen to understand more about search operator and its syntax. It is very important that you go through the links which I mention in my videos to understand things in more detail, as there can be multiple variations to each question because Azure is very big and a small change can make variations to the questions.
If you are liking the content, friends, then don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe the channel. As a reminder, if you are interested in obtaining the complete set of questions in PDF format, remember to take the gold membership and send an email to devopshub2023@gmail.com requesting your copy. Folks, if you do not want to commit to a monthly membership, then we do have different payment options as well available. So feel free to email us on the same email ID requesting more details around the other options. Now let's get back to the questions.
Your company has 2 on-premise servers named SRV01 and SRV02. Developers have created an application that runs on SRv01. The application calls a service on SRv02 by IP address. You plan to migrate the application on Azure virtual machines. You have configured two virtual machines on a single subnet in an Azure virtual network. You need to configure the two VMs with static internal IP address. What should you do? Your options are: modify the IP properties in Windows Network and Sharing Center, run the set Azure static VNet IP PowerShell commandlet, modify the VM properties in the Azure Management Portal, run the new Azure RMVM config PowerShell commandlet, run the set Azure subnet PowerShell commandlet. There is a lot of data in the question, so key thing is to summarize it and not get confused with distractors. If I sum up this question, then you basically need to configure static internal IP addresses of Azure virtual machines. And the correct way to do that is using set Azure static VNet IP commandlet, which is option B in our case. The set Azure static VNet IP PowerShell commandlet is used to set a static internal IP address of an Azure virtual machine. This commandlet allows you to set the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway for the virtual machine's network interface. Let's now look at why other options are not correct. So option A says modifying the IP addresses or IP properties in Windows Network and Sharing Center. It only applies to the local network interface of the VM and does not set a static internal IP address for the VM on the Azure Virtual Network. Option C is modifying VM properties in the Azure Management Portal. It does not provide a way to set static IP addresses for virtual machines. Option D, new Azure RMVM config is used to create a new virtual machine configuration object. And option E, set Azure subnet is used to modify the properties of an existing Azure subnet, not to set static IP addresses for virtual machines. I hope this clarifies why other options were not chosen as the correct answer. Let's go ahead with next question. You have an Azure subscription named subscription 1. You create an Azure storage account named Contoso Storage, and then you create a file share named data. Which UNC path should you include in a script that references files from the data file share? Now you can get similar questions in the exam, and what you need to do in such questions is you need to drag the appropriate values to the correct targets on the right hand side in the answer area. And there can be variations to this. However, in this case, you can use each value can be used once, more than once, or not at all. In the left hand side in the values section, you have blob, Contoso storage, file.core.windows.net, data, blob.core.windows.net. On the right hand side in the answer area, you can see we have 3 blanks. So basically you need to drag 3 values from the value section in the answer area. Now it can be that you might have to drag a single value twice, or these 3 values can be different altogether. So the UNC path format is / storage account name dot file.core.windows.net / file share name. Remember, this is the UNC format. Now in this question, the storage account name is Contoso storage and file share name is data. So going by the previous statement, the answer is / Contoso storage dot file.core.windows.net / data. So basically you have used 3 values out of the 5 available ones, and none of them is repeated in this case. Moving on to question number 43. Your company has an Azure Active Directory tenant that is configured for hybrid existence with the on-premise Active Directory domain. The on-premise virtual environment consists of virtual machines running on Windows Server 2012 R2 Hyper-V host servers. You have created some PowerShell scripts to automate the configuration of newly created VMs. You plan to create several new VMs and need a solution that ensures the script are run on the new VMs. Which of the following is the best solution? Your options are: place the scripts in a new virtual machine hard disk, configure a group policy object to run the scripts as startup scripts, configure a setup complete.cmd batch file in the scripts directory, configure a group policy object to run the scripts as logon scripts. Now, the correct answer in this case is option C. Configure a setup complete.cmd batch file in the scripts directory under setup. Now, Windows setup searches for the setup complete CMD in this directory when the startup happens. Let's look at this explanation in more detail now. Setup complete.cmd and error handler.cmd are custom scripts that run during or after the Windows setup process. They can be used to install applications or run other tasks by using cscript/w scripts. The setup complete.cmd runs with local system permissions and starts immediately after the user sees the desktop. This setting is disabled when using OEM product keys, except on enterprise editions and Windows Server operating systems. Error handler.cmd, which is not in the scope of this question, runs automatically when setup encounters a fatal error. It runs with local system permissions. Now, there is a link on the screen. You can refer to this link to understand more about these things in detail. Moving on to question number 44. You have an Azure directory tenant named DevOps Hub and an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. DevOps Hub contains a group named Developers. Subscription 1 contains a resource group named Dev. You need to provide the developers group with the ability to create Azure Logic Apps in the Dev resource group. The solution you choose is, on Subscription 1, you assign the Logic App operator role to the developers group. Does this meet the goal? You need to choose between yes or no. Now let's understand what Logic App operator role is. This role lets you read, enable, and disable Logic apps, but not edit or update them. The requirement in this case is to create them. Hence, this is an incorrect solution. You would need the Logic App contributor role, which lets you manage Logic apps. So there can be a variation to this question. If the solution was talking about the Logic App contributor role, then you would have chosen yes as the answer. Next question. Your company has an Azure Active Directory tenant that is configured for hybrid coexistence with the on-premise Active Directory domain. You plan to deploy several new virtual machines in Azure. The VMs will have the same operating system and custom software requirements. You configure a reference VM in the on-premise virtual environment. You then generalize the VM to create an image. So basically, you have created a VM image. You need to upload the image to Azure to ensure that it is available for selection when you create the new Azure VMs. Which PowerShell commandlet should you use? Your options are: add AZ image data disk, add AZ image, add AZ VHD, and the last option is add AZ VM. The correct answer in this case is option C, add AZ VHD. This commandlet uploads on-premise virtual hard disks in .vhd file format to a blob storage account as fixed virtual hard disks. You can refer to the link to understand more about this command and how the images are uploaded. Question number 46. You have an Azure policy as shown in the following exhibit. What is the effect of the policy? Your options are: you can create Azure SQL servers in Contoso RG1 only. You are prevented from creating Azure SQL servers in Contoso RG1 only. You can create Azure SQL servers in any resource group within subscription. You are prevented from creating Azure SQL servers anywhere in subscription one. Let's try to read the policy from top to bottom. Firstly, scope defines which level is the policy applied at, and in this case, it is applied at subscription level. Next is the exclusion section. And you can see Contoso RG1 is exempted. So everything under subscription 1 will need to adhere to this policy except Contoso RG1 resource group. Now, next is the policy definition. It is the section which I have highlighted now. Here, certain resource types are not allowed to be created. And finally, the parameter section says the resource group which is not allowed is the resource which is not allowed is Microsoft SQL Server. So if I sum up whatever I just said, then it means you can't create resource type SQL servers in subscription 1 except Contoso RG1. And if we rephrase this statement, then it means you can create SQL servers in Contoso RG1 only, which is the right answer, option A in our case. I hope this clarifies to you how we read the policy from top to bottom. I already have created a detailed video around Azure policies. If you are interested in learning more about how the Azure policy works and what is the hierarchy, you can go through the video. I'll put the link to the video in the description section of this one. Let's move to the next question. You have an Azure AD tenant named DevOpsHub.com that contains the groups shown in the table on the left. DevOpsHub.com contains the users shown in the table on the right. Now, on the left table, we have 3 groups, group 1, group 2, and group 3. And then we are shown with the membership of these groups. So group 1 is not nested to any group, but group 2 is member of group 1 and group 3 is member of group 2. So we are talking about nested relationships here. On the right hand side, the table has again in the names, now you have users and the membership is which user is added to which group. So user 1 is part of group 1, user 2 is part of group 2, user 3 is part of group 3, and user 4 is not part of any of the groups. Now the condition is you assign the Azure Active Directory Premium plan to license to group 1 and user 4. Which users are assigned the Azure Active Directory Premium plan to license? Now we are talking about Azure AD P2 license here, and the license is directly applied to group 1 and user 4 only. And we need to tell to which all users will it get applied ultimately. Your options are user 1, 2, and 4 only, user 4 only, user 1 and 4 only, user 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is like all users. Now, whenever dealing with Azure Active Directory license assignment to a nested group, you need to remember that assignment to nested groups is not supported. If you assign a license to nested group, then it will only be applied to first level members of the group. Again, I repeat, it will only be applied to the first level members of the group. In this case, it is assigned to user 4 and group 1. So user 4 will get it assigned. And then if you look at both the tables, then you will notice user 1 is the first level member, which means it will get the Azure AD P2 license, and group 2 or 3 are nested, which contain other users, so they won't get the license assigned. Therefore, the correct answer in this case is option C, user 1 and user 4 only. I hope it is clear to you. If you have any doubts, then you can post them in the comments section and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. Now on my screen, there is a link which you can refer to understand the limitations and known issues which you'll face when you are dealing with nested groups and Azure AD P2 license. Let's move to next question. Your company has an Azure subscription that includes a storage account, a resource group, a blob container, and a file share. A colleague named Jim Taylor makes use of a solitary Azure Resource Manager ARM template to deploy a virtual machine and an additional Azure storage account. You want to review the ARM template that was used by Jim Taylor. Solution is you access the resource group blade. Does the solution meet the goal? You need to choose between yes or no. Yes, this is the correct solution. To view a template from deployment history, you just need to go to the resource group and should be able to see the result of last deployment. Upon clicking on this, it will show you the summary of the deployment, which will include the template used for deployment and the parameters passed. Question number 49. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 and an on-premise deployment of Microsoft System Center Service Manager. Subscription 1 contains a virtual machine named VM1. You need to ensure that an alert is set in Service Manager when the amount of available memory on VM1 is below 10%. What should you do first? Your options are deploy a function app, create an automation runbook, create a notification, deploy the IT service management connector ITSM. The correct answer in this case is option D. Deploy the IT service management connector ITSM. It allows you to connect Azure and a supported IT service management product or service such as Microsoft System Center Service Manager. Next question. You have 3 offices and an Azure subscription that contains an Azure Active Directory tenant. You need to grant user management permissions to a local administrator in each office. What should you use? Your options are access packages in Azure AD Entitlement Management, Azure Roles, Administrative Units, Azure AD Roles. The correct answer is option C, Administrative Units. Administrative units restrict permissions in a role to any portion of your organization that you define. You could, for example, use administrative units to delegate the help desk administrator role to regional support specialists, so they can manage users only in the region that they support. You can refer to this link to understand more about administrative units in Azure.
Thank you for staying with us till the end of this video, folks. I hope you have liked the content and I'll see you soon in the next part of the series.